Hi, everybody. Thanks to everyone for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services at medcommsnetworking.com and the associated website. So services, information, resources, activities for people who work across the globe in and around medical communications, medical education, medical publishing, and so on. There are a variety of resources there. We do a lot of webinars. We capture a lot of video content, which you'll find over at NetworkPharma TV. There's hundreds of videos now on all manner of topics. A shout out to those of you who are interested in the business. Maybe you're thinking of joining as a medical writer, account manager. There's a first MedComms job resource. I also run a service for freelancers called MedComms Workbook, medcommsworkbook.com. And that does a couple of things. It's an opportunity for anyone who's looking for a freelancer to send me a message, and I send it on to currently about 260 freelancers. But I also do quite a lot, I think it's fair to say, to try and support sort of networking, education, learning support one way or another for that group. But more than that, again, I'd hope it would be acknowledged that for the last few years, I've done quite a lot to encourage freelancers wherever they're in the world to talk to each other, one way or the other. My group is useful, I think, in the way that it works for those people that are a member of it. But there's lots of people who go, that's not what I want, Peter. And there are lots of other groups that you can join. But the important thing, I think, for a freelancer is not to sit on your own and not to know what's going on. And we have had, and let's just say, I think we've had a very disrupted year. But it's a mixed picture out there, and there are different narratives going around. And some people have seen not much of a problem, and others have seen very severe problems. And we've had a number of meetings. I've run various discussions, polls, whatever, online, which has tried to highlight what is going on out there. And I think the important thing is that I come back to this point. If you're sitting as a freelancer just on your own, you don't know what's happening with anybody else. So be part of the conversation. And what we've just done in January of 2024 is run my so-called Barometer survey, where we've ended up with 550 people from around the world filling that form in. And we've got some fascinating data, I think. And I hope that it will give everyone lots to think about. And we're just going to run through it today a little bit, and between us as a panel, reflect a little bit on what's happening out there. But the important point is it's making you all think. And those of you who run your own networking groups or communities of interests or training schemes or whatever, freelancers, I hope that it's feeding into what you do and you can use it to inform your own discussions and so on. I would say that any discussion that we have around it, if you can use hashtag MedComms maybe, then we can share it and amplify the discussions. That's very useful. Anyway, I'm going to come back to that in a second. I'm going to show you what we're talking about if you've not seen it already. But just to begin with, I'm absolutely delighted, and I was very keen that we got a little bit of a group together today to talk around the issues that are raised. And it's an international group. I'm going to start by asking them simply to introduce themselves and what they do, the group that they run. Lisa, I'm going to hand over to you in the States to begin with. Just tell us who you are and what you do.
Yes, I'm the U.S. representative. So I'm Lisa Baker. I am a medical writer since 2006 and freelancing since 2017. And last year, about a year, almost a year ago this time, after the ISMAP annual meeting, so that's the International Society for Medical Publication Planning, which is kind of my professional home as a freelancer who works in publications. After the annual meeting, we had managed to get quite a nice group, about a dozen of us freelancers together at that meeting. And then I launched an email list for freelancers who work in publications, which I very much invite you to join if you work in pubs and you haven't already joined. And I'll put it's freelancersinpubs.org. I'll put that in the chat at some point here. It's free, everything's free. And a large part of the reason for the email list and the group is to facilitate closer communication and collaboration between freelancers and ISMAP. And including, ISMAP has generously been offering freelancers discounts to attend the meetings. There was a nice group at the European meeting in London in January, expecting a nice group at the annual meeting in April in Washington. So, but the only way you get these discounts is like by being connected to my email list. I'm sorry to say that's not the way I would prefer that's going, but that at the moment, that's how that runs. So I invite you to connect with me. We're also doing monthly Zoom calls with great people like Eleanor has been on and Peter has been on. So that's what I'm doing. And we now have 375 freelancers who are signed up for Freelancers in Pubs. So it's gotten to be quite a nice group.
Yeah. No, that's great. So thank you for setting the scene there. And again, I would endorse that, please. And I've tried to push anybody who's working in pubs to that group. It's become quite a lively group in the last year or so, and full credit to you for starting that. And just to be clear, the association with ISMAP is there, as it were. The benefit is there, very real benefit there through your list, but it's not an ISMAP. It's not an ISMAP initiative. It's Lisa's initiative, sort of thing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to keep going. Laura, tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Thank you for launching the survey and also then organising this webinar. I'm Laura. I am based in Switzerland, British originally, but I've been in Switzerland for 14 years now. And I have been freelancing in MedComms since about 2017. Various work within MedComms, publications, online content, a little bit of kind of everything. And I am currently, but soon to be, handing it over as the EMWA Freelance Business Group Chair. And I have been the chair since 2019. The EMWA has got this freelance business group. We're a committee of 5. And we run all the freelance stuff for EMWA basically. So there's the Freelance Business Forum, whether it's at the online congress or the face-to-face congress. We organise the forum for freelancers, which is free if you're going to the congress. And a great resource to network with people. And then also we have our section in the EMWA Medical Writing Journal, which is right at the back. It's called Out on Our Own. And then we have the website, we've got the freelance directory. So there's lots of things going on. We did do the freelance survey last year and published that, and we did a freelance issue, a whole issue of freelancing, which I was guest editor with Satya and Shania, and that was published in June last year. So if you are an EMWA member and you're a freelancer and you've missed that, then go back to see whether you can find that. And so, yeah, but soon I will be handing the baton over to a Portuguese lady, Adriana Rocha. She's going to be taking over the freelance business group.
Fantastic, thanks. Just to clarify that, that June issue of Medical Writing is freely accessible to everybody, isn't it? It's open access. So I'm not just saying that because I've got an article in there, which I think is very useful.
Peter's got an article. He talks about networking, so
exactly,
and Eleanor as well, yeah.
Exactly. So you don't need to be an EMWA member to access that, but you need to be an EMWA member to be part of the freelance activity. But also the freelance forum is a specific group within EMWA, isn't it? There are freelancers choose to become part of the forum as opposed to just
the
members,
forum is
right?
basically the meetings we have at the events, and then we've now got our LinkedIn group. And that is a closed group, so you just need to request to be part of the LinkedIn group, and you have to be an EMWA member because it's an EMWA freelance section. But we can just check whether you're a member. If you're requesting to be a member, then just even put your membership number when you're putting your request through in a little message, so then we already know you're a member, and then we can add you straight away. Yeah, that's the separate thing. And then we have got a group. Yeah, there are several freelancers. We actually don't know how many are EMWA members. We set up a thing when you become a member. When you click on your profile, you can say whether you're a freelancer, but that's relatively new. So maybe some older members don't actually know about that. So then that will enable us to engage actually how many EMWA members are freelancers, but we think it's probably about a third, whether they're full freelancers or doing a bit of freelancing on the side.
I've got you. Okay, great. So thank you very much for that. And Ellie, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing.
Yes. Hi, everybody. I am Eleanor Steele and I work as the MedComms Mentor. I've been in MedComms for getting on for 20 years, and I've been freelance since 2018. Since 2020, I have been working as the MedComms Mentor, providing specialist training and mentoring support to medical writers of all career stages. And I also make sure that I am supporting freelancers with free content, particularly on my YouTube channel. and I will pop a link in the comments here and onto the YouTube video when this recording goes out, so that you can see that too.
Excellent. And we should say, full transparency all the time, I run the MedComms workbook, and Eleanor is a member of that, and she's working with me to develop some additional services which we're trying to provide into the MedComms workbook along the lines of education and support and so on. So thank you very much for doing that, Ellie. Right, okay, so that's who we are. We've got a great audience. I'm looking at some of the names. We've got people in the audience who I recognise running their own groups. And so on. As I said earlier on, and I'll say it again, the whole point of what I'm trying to do, and have been doing for the last few weeks, is providing this information to you guys to use however you want. Inform your own group discussions, inform your own training and learning and so on, but all the time feedback and what your own comment is, and use hashtag MedComms and so on. And let's just have the open discussion. That's what I'm trying to do. So let's just, I don't want to get bogged down in this, and I know everyone's thinking he's going to, but I'm going to try not to get bogged down. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to choose the right window there. Hopefully everyone's going to nod at me and say that you can see my Safari. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to spell this out a little bit to anyone watching this and go, look, anybody can be looking at this data. That's the whole point. The easiest way is to go through the MedComms workbook. You'll find Freelance Life on the left-hand side in the menu, and you'll find the links here. So this survey was run in January, 550 people, which I think was much more than I expected, and I was going into this fairly ambitious as I do. So I think it's brilliant that we've got that sort of level of response. I think any online survey, you need to have a sort of a health warning and go, it is just an online survey, Peter. Okay, we haven't got a representative, verified, closed population of people. I just went and shouted about it and said, anybody want to join in with us? And obviously bent a few arms, and Lisa's talked about it, and Laura and Ellie and others, and some of the people on this call have been shouting about it and going, let's all join in and try and help this. And I think, for all its faults as an online survey, when you get up to numbers like this, and when you have access to the data and you can see it, it gives us all a lot to think about. That's what I'm trying to do here. Okay, so just very briefly to show you what we have got, and maybe just to say we've got a full data set here, which we'll have a look at in a minute. I have also produced it as a PDF report. When there's lots of comments, it can be a little bit difficult to read them all online, but that PDF report is 107 pages, so you might want to think before you print it out. Okay, I've done a number of slices of the data, and I'm very happy to hear from anybody who wants to look at a particular slice of data within reason. I can do that quite easily, but there's a number of there. One of the things I was hoping from this, I was wondering about with this survey, was whether we would see any differences between different groups of freelancers. And I can't really see them, not significant. There's talking points, but I can't see anything dramatic in there. I think it's been a rough year pretty much for most of us, most freelancers in and around MedComms, but individuals see very different pictures, and I still think there's maybe there are some differences. I'm sure there are, but I don't think we've shown them very well in this. I did want to just click on that and go, that LinkedIn post, which I posted the morning after we closed the survey, has attracted quite a reasonable amount of attention, comments and so on. You'll see a number of people. Sophie's in there, Sarah Nelson's in there somewhere, other freelancers, other people who've been involved in community groups. There's quite a lot of good comment in there, I think. And again, it represents or shows you how different some of the views are. And we can sit and argue and we can shout at the screen a little bit. But if we're thinking about what they're saying and understanding that life is not just how we see it, then I think that's producing a useful result. But if we can, my basic plea is, if you're interested and you're talking about this survey, try and do it around this sort of LinkedIn group, LinkedIn discussion, just because it then centralizes the comments, if that makes sense. Okay, let's just have a quick look. As I say, I'm not going to get bogged down in this, I hope, but you can all be doing this as we're talking. What I was going to do, and it should be there, is just send you all that link. So you can be doing it while I'm talking, if you like. Some of you, I'm sure, are already there. It's freely accessible to everybody. Hopefully that hasn't come up on the screen there. But basically, you can flick through and you can see where people have come from. Again, be careful of this. We might talk a little bit about where are all the people in those other countries that haven't joined in so much, because we know they're out there somewhere, but to some extent this is reflecting just how we've shouted about it and where we've shouted about it. So you'll see the United Kingdom's 50% of the response. That's probably not unexpected because it's me shouting a lot. Lisa, I give you credit because you've been shouting a bit in the States and so on. But just, you know, understand what you're looking at, guys, before you make any take the data too literally. We've got some questions about how long you've been working in MedComms and so on, how long you've been working as freelancers. I mean, the point I would simply make, and you can look at it yourself later on, is that we've got quite a lot of very experienced freelancers answering this, but we've also got plenty of newbies as well. There's quite a lot of variation in there. I thought this was interesting actually because I wasn't sure what was happening. In the last couple of years, I would argue that there's an entire industry has now grown up around encouraging healthcare professionals and academics to do MedComms freelancing, particularly medical writing, on as a side hustle sort of thing. I have a little bit of a problem with that. I think you have to be a bit careful with that. I think genuine MedComms freelancers, it's difficult to do that as a side hustle with a little bit of training. I think you need some real experience. So it's interesting to me that the population that seem to be answering this survey are more in that camp, the people who are genuinely doing MedComms with a background in MedComms. Again, that might be a point that people want to argue with me about. But then we've got a couple of interesting questions, and you know, it does get interesting for me. I mean, it also, you know, how you write a question can influence the answer. Okay, so I've said, do you work as many hours as you wanted? My basic view is that if you're working more hours than you want to, then you're a freelancer, so you can sort of control that. I thought it was obvious that we were asking whether you'd work less than you wanted to, and most of the answers would appear to be that way. But there are a few people in there who went, oh, I work too many hours, and I thought, well, sort of as a freelancer, that's up to you. But you know, what's that? 50% of people are not working the hours they wanted. I'm not asking how many, and I think that's important. I've had some criticism for not asking more specific questions. How many hours, how much you earn. So it doesn't matter to me because you might be someone that wants to work 10 hours or 20 hours or 40 hours in a week. The question is whether you're meeting your own targets. A question I have for many freelancers is, do you think like that? You're running a business. Do you start a year? Do you start a week? Do you start a financial year thinking about what you want to achieve in the next year? Have you a business plan? Do you know how many hours you need to work, how many you want to work? Do you monitor it a little bit and say, I am or I'm not reaching that target?
Before we move on from that, Peter,
go on, Eddie, go on.
I was just going to comment on whether people worked as many hours as you wanted. I think a lot of people would look at that result and think there would be a lot of people who hadn't necessarily been able to find enough work to fill the hours that they wanted to fill with paid work. But looking at the comments was quite interesting to see the number of people who said they had had illness or caring responsibilities or changes that were totally separate to their working life that meant that they weren't able to work as many hours as they wanted, regardless of how much work was coming in. So look at the comments because that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I agree totally with Ellie. I was going to say that exactly. There was a lot of people that had COVID and illnesses and things like that, or was doing something else. So yeah, and there's 162 comments on there. So
yeah,
there's plenty to, and again, let's just make the point that you can. I mean, there's one straight away. My son's been diagnosed with diabetes. Again, it's a degree of interpretation here, but also look at it in the context of all the other comments as well. So whilst that's absolutely right, there is no doubt, certainly in my mind, having read it all, that a lot of people were struggling to get enough work.
Oh yeah.
So it's about so that's where the comments are so useful, because and I always with these surveys enthuse and champion, you know, people filling in the comments, because you can get so much more insight into it from that. But you sort of have to read through it to get your own impression of what's going on there. Just flicking on a little bit. Sorry, I'm going to get bogged down on that. I'd also say that the question I think was straightforward, but it's open to interpretation. So if you have other responsibilities, then is that not built into your business plan? You might want to work more, but you can't because of this or that. You know, is that not part of the business planning process? But okay, let's accept the fact you can interpret that in slightly different ways, and there are different reasons why people work so many hours. But the most important point there is not everybody's the same. So when people want to compare and contrast, how many hours did you work? How much money did you make? it's not a sensible comparison, because someone might be completely happy working 1 or 2 days a week, someone else is completely unhappy, and so on and so forth. So you've got to think about this, and this is where having discussions within the groups helps sort of bring some of that out. This is just, you know, it's just everyone works across all sorts of different areas. But this one I thought was interesting. How many clients do you work for in 2023? And that's something like 55% of people are working with 4 or less clients. Now that's sort of logical, but an awful lot of freelancers I talk to say, yeah, I work with lots of people. No, you don't. You tend to work with a few people, and many of you actually are working with very small numbers of people. Now that might be entirely sensible, but it does leave you quite vulnerable if that client decides to change their mind, or, as we know has been happening in the last year, clients have decided not to work with freelancers, pull the work back, and so on. So it's just, again, and again, the comments are fascinating. Have a think about what that's saying. This one, again, again, we can interpret it in some different ways, but basically there's a simple question there. Did you match your expectations last year? And what's that? Something like 45% earning less than expected. Okay, now again, you've got to assume that people have sat down and worked out what they expected and wanted, and then tracked it and then decided whether it matched it or not. But I think overall that tells a message, and it just reinforces what we all know, which is that there was a lot of disruption last year, and some people certainly suffered from a quiet time, or peaks and troughs. Something that comes through a lot in this survey is how, and some experienced freelancers have been around for years, it's been the most disrupted year. You know, the peaks and troughs have been more, and we know feast and famine is a common problem with freelancing. But you know, last year was particularly quiet at points and particularly busy at others. You know, I've come out not too bad at the end of it, but it was a more disrupted year than usual. Is not an uncommon comment. This one, I'm just going to mention, there was a lot of chatter, particularly towards the end of last year, about the pressure on freelancers to decrease rates. That doesn't seem to be happening out there, and there's quite a lot of people who are increasing their rates. One of the things, I don't know, Lisa, whether you'd be able to pick up on and comment on, and we'll come back to it, let's not stop now, but in the US, it seemed like more of the US respondents were increasing their rates versus other people. Again, I'm not sure the survey proves anything, but it's interesting that there's some talking points like that. Again, this is reflecting the fact that some of you have one client giving you an awful lot of work, and if that one client changes their mind, you may have a problem. Now that is just something to be thinking about. Having said all of this, and there's a certain amount of negativity and concern and whatever coming through, but you know, most people are very happy being freelancer. You know, that's one of the things that comes through quite strongly here. And in fact, if we and most don't want to stop being freelancing. Let's be honest about it, though, a number of people have stopped in the last year for purely practical reasons, and maybe we'll come back to that. But if you start looking at this sort of information, you know, I enjoy a good work-life balance. You know, again, nothing completely unexpected, but it's interesting to see the data and interesting to see the comments around it. You know, a lot of freelancers are quite happy being freelancers, don't want to go back into employment because they've got a good life-work balance. It's just quite a few in the last year have had quite a disrupted income stream, and that is a cause for some concern. Couple of quick final points. The AI question I find interesting. I would love, with all of this data, I'd love to have the last 2 years and the next 2 years. I haven't got the last 2 years, but we might well have the next couple of years in a year or two's time, sort of thing. Will that change in terms of AI going forward? Obviously, it wouldn't have been relevant maybe even a year ago. But that's a lot of people who aren't using tools like ChatGPT. Again, the question is open to a degree of interpretation. Professional organizations, a lot of freelancers aren't members of professional organizations. I'd be a little bit careful with this data because it depends a little bit where we've marketed the survey. But in all my surveys of freelancers, a lot say we're not a member of an organization, which I find intriguing. And we've also got we've tried to split out other sorts of community of interests and networking. A lot aren't. I find that interesting. Obviously, I've got an agenda because I run one, but you know, there's lots of others. I'm very keen to encourage people to join others, especially in the context of a tough year. Why wouldn't you join with others? But then the counter argument is, yeah, but Peter, I'm not spending money on a subscription or something like that. I have to say my own personal view is, in difficult times, it's worth spending a bit of money. This is the time to invest, not to stop investing. But that's a personal view, and you may say I've got an agenda there. Recruitment, this might be a topic we get into some discussion about, or maybe not. Most freelancers answering this survey don't work through recruiters, and to be honest, the comments were there was quite a lot of negative comment about working through recruiters. Okay, maybe that's something we can pick up on. Training, Ellie, I'm going to ask you to a little bit later about what you took away from the training questions. Basically, there's some quite interesting information, and again, for all of you running your own groups, there's some interesting information about what people are interested in. And then we've got a gazillion comments in our last 2 text boxes, which we won't go through here, but I would encourage people to have a look at. It's well worth having a look at those comments and thinking about what people are saying, not just about freelancing, but also the state of medcoms, the state of life generally, sort of thing. Okay, so I did feel like I got a bit bogged down there. I was trying not to. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, and I just hope that people will go and have a look at that. And as I say, join in the conversations and so on. Okay, so having done that and held on to most people, so thank you. Do put into the chat and the Q&A any questions you've got as we start to talk, and we'll try and pick up on those. Okay, but to begin with, I'm going to start with Laura. This is going to be a bit of a random conversation, but Laura, I've wittered away a little bit. You've had a chance to have a look at it. You sort of represent European freelancers here. What were your thoughts when you were looking at that? I mean, just very simply, and what's been your experience within your group and yourself personally of the last year or so?
Yeah,
does this chime with you? Does it resound with you?
I think you mentioned this at the beginning, but doing a survey like this for freelancers who are generally on their own at home has really, and then providing the results like you have done just freely for everyone, it's quite reassuring for a freelancer. I felt like it was quite reassuring to see what others have been doing. You don't have somebody that you can just ask a question to. You know, we have our networks, but do we talk about our salary and do we talk about our clients and stuff to each other? But I think when you see data like this, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm doing that, right? Okay, that's, you know, that's reassuring for me. Or maybe it will instigate some changes for the future year to put people's freelancing plans. So yeah, I think it's really great that you've done this. In terms of my own personal experience, actually 2023 was one of my profitable years. But now coming into 2024, I've lost one of those clients. I had 2 strong clients, lost one of those clients. So then things are dramatically shifted again. And it definitely feels a bit like, okay, I need to be careful. I don't stress about it. I feel like there's going to be work coming through. In a European perspective and being part of EMWA and having discussions with members, there does seem to be a few colleagues of mine that have shifted to going back into in-house work and going to salaried jobs and giving up the freelancing. I've spoken to several people that have decided to do that. And yeah, I don't know if it's because of the market or personal reasons, but there does definitely been a shift. And I did a little bit. I went into a 60% position a couple of years ago, and it just wasn't for me. I missed my freelancing. I missed that flexibility and went back. But I like, for me, I wouldn't give up my freelancing, but definitely I've spoken to more people about them shifting back into work in-house. In terms of the European aspect and the responses, I think I was a little bit surprised to see how few responses we got from some countries in Europe. I mean, I did a little bit of a calculation. I think we had about 81 members from European countries. Compared that, of course, that excludes the UK, but compare that to the response you got from the UK, which is about almost half of the responses from the UK. I think I was expecting a bit more responses from European countries. I don't know whether that means that that freelancers in Europe are not responding to these surveys, or they are shifting back to salaried jobs and they feel like they can't respond to a survey like this. They're no longer a freelancer. So I don't really know what's happened there, but I was hoping to get a few more responses from certain countries. However, saying that, when I compare kind of, if I take the EMWA members data, which actually I think we had 161 responses that said they were MMO members. The data kind of is similar to when you look at the whole data. So there's nothing that really stands out specifically for Europe, even though obviously some of those members are out of Europe as well.
Yeah, I think it's one of my disappointments was we didn't get more data from outside of the UK, because I'm very immersed in the UK, and there's a lot of there has been a lot of change in the UK very specifically, and I have to say IR35 played a part in that, and I will die on that hill. I know a lot of people, there's a lot of reluctance to talk about that, but IR35 did disrupt things. But we know that there are agencies in the last year in the UK definitely who've simply gone, for various reasons, we won't be going with freelancers now. We will not be putting as much work out to freelancers and so on. It's just very difficult to track it all. But I did wonder a little bit about the difference, outside the UK, and it's not come through as strongly as I'd hoped. But we had a reasonable response from the States, Lisa, and thank you very much for you. I know you've been sort of pushing people a little bit out there. But from same as Laura, what's your perspective sitting there in the US from the data that you're seeing?
Yeah, do you mind if I share my screen, Peter?
Oh, okay. You can give it a go. Go on. Yeah, it should work.
See if it works. Okay. Yeah, so I was interested in these breakdowns. Like Laura, I was disappointed that there were not more responses from the US. So you're seeing 86 there, right? And that's similar, I think, Laura, to the number you said overall from Europe, not UK. And half the responses came from the UK. This was also, the results were also broken out for the 100 freelancers who said that they were affiliated with Freelancers in pubs. And honestly, the pattern of responses, I didn't think was all that, different from the overall pattern of responses in terms of freelancers who say they're in publications versus freelancers overall. But I did think that the pattern of responses for the UK and the US, and then I was just getting intrigued by this other slice of people who say that they've been freelancing for less than 1 year. Those are some pretty interesting differences. I mean, what jumped out at me was that the freelancers who responded from the UK were more experienced. There were only 9% said that they had been in MedComms for less than 5 years, compared to in the US, that was 31%. So I kind of went to sleep and woke up thinking about that. And all I can say is that I assume that this is just a self-selecting sample. I mean, I can't conclude that freelancers in the UK are more experienced, but just that the pool of freelancers that Peter interacts with in the UK are more experienced than the pool that responded from other parts of the world. But still, it was, and that'll no doubt drive a lot of the other responses here. But if you look at, it just jumps out at me. So I've highlighted some of these figures that freelancers in the US, 57% said they did not work as many hours as they wanted. And I really am taking the points that that Eleanor was making, that when you look at the comments, this isn't necessarily just because you couldn't get the work, but because other things intruded, intervened in your life. When you see freelancers who've been working for less than a year, 65% say that they didn't work as many hours as they wanted. And 24% of them didn't really know how to say whether their rate had gone up or down. So I'm seeing there people who are quite new, some of whom may not have even yet brought in real work, right? So they don't know yet how to respond to some of these questions, which is absolutely fair, right? Also jumping out at me is who is satisfied with their role as a freelancer. So in parentheses here in this row, in parentheses at the front, you're either satisfied or very satisfied with your role as a freelancer. Overall, that's 70% in the whole sample. It's 72% in the UK. And again, these are more experienced freelancers. And it's good news, I think, if the way you read that is that more experienced freelancers are also saying that they're continuing, for the most part, to be very satisfied. Not all of them. In the US, among a less experienced pool, 66% say that they're satisfied with their role as a freelancer. And in the US, this really struck me, is that they're hanging in there. In the US, that was the highest response, saying that they're very unlikely to stop freelancing, was 67% in the US versus 57% in the overall pool. The folks who have just started trying to freelance, on the data, 48% say that so far they're satisfied or very satisfied with their role. Only 45% say they're very unlikely to stop freelancing, meaning 55% are thinking about it. You just have to say, to folks on, folks who may be on this call who are new to freelancing, it's worth saying, as we keep saying, a lot of us thought that 23 was an unusual year. It was a tough year. So this is a tough time to be trying to break in. And I hope that people will persevere if they think that the freelance, way of working is a good choice for them. I hope that people will persevere for a while and not give up too quickly. I think I would fall in that camp who say I'm very unlikely to stop freelancing, even though 23 was a tough year. I didn't have the normal workflow. I didn't have the normal, inquiries coming in, for my time that I'm used to getting. I had to hustle more. But I think, as Laura said, I wouldn't give it up, right? Because I just value so much the flexibility and control over my own time that comes with freelancing.
And I think a lot of people would be saying that, Lisa. Just out of interest, within the sort of group that you're running, your monthly meetings and so on, is the sort of chatter and informal chatter, does it? I suppose what I'm saying is, did the survey surprise or not? Were you picking this up in the meetings you were having anyway, that people were talking about the fact it's been disrupted and so on? The sense I've got from everyone really is the survey just backs up what we're all hearing in our own groups and so on. But in the US, and particularly from a US point of view, do you think that was just the case?
Yeah, I should say that unlike the EMWA freelance forum that Laura runs, I don't have like a LinkedIn group or a chat forum. ISMAP has a chat facility called the Freelance Community, but it's lightly used. So it's not as if there's a lot of real-time chatter in the folks who have signed up for my email list. But during the webinars that we ran, and especially last fall, one of the webinars was on how do you manage your workflow. I think there was plenty of chatter among people. But it is, and I think you see this in the survey results, Peter, it is a really mixed picture. I think there are plenty of freelancers out there, and you keep saying this. I think there are plenty of freelancers out there who, maybe they had to scramble a little bit in 23, but not that much, and without, they were readily able to find the work that they wanted. There are plenty in our responses here. You're seeing that there are plenty of freelancers who were able to bring in the work that they wanted last year. And there were plenty of freelancers who were like, whoa, what happened? And, I think, Peter, again, to your point, like any given freelancer has only the clients that they work with, right? And so their picture of what's going on is very much shaped by what happened with the clients that they work with, right? It would have been super interesting if this survey had been done in 21, which all of us thought that was a gangbuster year, right? That there was just so much work, right? So it would have been interesting because we could have compared, of course that would have been coming from COVID, and that would have had its own flavor. But, as you say, if you do the survey again in a couple of years, it'll be interesting to see how it compares. It's an utterly mixed picture. I think the important thing to say is work is out there, you just may have to hustle to find it. Work is out there. Their clients are.
I think again, the experienced freelancers I've talked to, a lot of them have said, for the first time in several years, I've had to go and knock on doors. It's not just coming to me in the way that it was a couple of years ago, sort of thing. And but there's a fine line between going and hustling and getting some work, and going and hustling and not getting any work. And when you're a freelancer, you need that work coming in. And there are experienced freelancers who have really, I know they have struggled, and it comes back to why has the work dried up? And a couple of people in the chat are asking. I think there's a multitude of questions, and we probably don't entirely know, but there was a boom during COVID. And then maybe there's just a natural recheck sort of thing. There's a lot more freelancers out there. Someone said, I think Sean said, there's plenty of work. It's just there's lots more freelancers chasing the work. I think there's less work. It's as simple as that. It's very difficult to track that. Just let's lose your screen. Sorry, I know
I'm trying to.
I just wanted to flag one thing before Lisa stopped sharing. That in the group of people who were freelance for less than a year, 24% of them had been in MedComms for less than a year. And I think that lack of experience within MedComms may well be driving some of the other numbers, because if you haven't been in MedComms for very long, it's very difficult to demonstrate your capabilities because you just don't have that heritage, but you're also not going to have a lot of contacts within the industry. And people who are hiring freelancers will generally go for the people who they have worked with before or know of from previous agency jobs and things like that. So I think you are going to hit a lot of barriers if you don't have a network within MedComms and start going freelance either straight off the bat or after only, a short-term job within an agency.
I think that's a really, really important point. And I suppose I was touching on that earlier, that there are a lot of people who have been jumping straight into freelancing. The point of not doing that by going through the agencies or whatever is understanding the business, being trained properly, but it's the contacts. And it's the contacts when you hit the difficult times, you go back to your contacts and you go, hey, do you remember I'm here, sort of thing. You need the contacts there. Lisa, I am going to ask you, can you just stop sharing?
I know,
your
Peter,
screen?
I'm sitting here for the last 3 minutes trying to figure out how to stop screen sharing.
Just top of your screen, you should have a stop sharing.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to stop I'm going to stop you sharing from here.
Yeah, okay? Thank you.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry. That was my technical glitch for today.
That's fine. Okay, but Ellie, sorry, it'll all be my fault at the end of the day because I spent too long to begin with talking. But Ellie, just talk a little bit from your point of view. What have you seen? What are the points that you want to make? And for your particular interest in training, and we asked some questions about what training needs were out there. Just talk a little bit about
that. So one of the things that I want to do is answer one of the questions that's come in on the Q&A, which is talking about the type of work that people are doing and asking specifically whether they think that freelance medical writers are going to be providing services outside of working on publications. Obviously, we've talked a bit about that because that's Lisa's wheelhouse. But I wanted to flag that publications were definitely a significant part of the freelance work, but there's an awful lot of other types of work that freelancers are doing. So if you look at the survey results on question 7, this gives a breakdown. And I think publications, education, so both accredited and not accredited, plus content for events. Those are the really big, chunky areas where a lot of freelancers are doing work. I was quite surprised to see that there's about 30% of people who responded to the survey in the full data set saying that they were doing online content writing, because I wouldn't see that as part of a traditional MedComms type role, because that's usually going to be more for a kind of non-specialist audience. It may well be that there are nuances there and there are some people doing it for HCP websites and things like that, but I think that's quite an interesting one, especially looking at the comments. And I was also quite surprised to see that there's only around 12 to 13% of people saying that they were doing regulatory writing, because I thought there was a sort of bigger proportion of people doing that, but maybe I've got my my wires crossed and more people are actually going to be based in-house rather than freelancing on the regulatory side. So that was quite interesting to me.
I just think, sorry, I'm going to interrupt just simply because I think some of this reflects the audience we ended up attracting.
Absolutely.
And that, regulatory writing is a little bit different. So, I think we've just got to be a little bit careful. The point is there's lots of different things that people are doing. And certainly, as you say, that's question 7.
And seeing who's responding, it is kind of an interesting one. The other thing that I was quite interested to see was over 40% of people said that they've been working on patient content. I think that is definitely something that has been growing over the last few years and is different from when I first came into the industry, all those many years ago. But I was also quite surprised to see that only around 10% of people were working on social media type content, which, given the 30% or so working on online content writing, I thought those two would be more similar. So yeah, that was quite interesting. But basically, my answer to the question around types of work, there's an awful lot more than publications work going on in the freelance sphere.
If I can add to that, I think
oh yeah,
I'm one of those, personally, I'm one of those that came more from publications like journal writing, and then now I do such a variety of projects, and I did online content and like almost specialized blog content writing in 2023, which I hadn't done before, but I started working for a startup company and was like, okay, yeah, I'll try that. I've done interviewing experts and then writing them up as articles for online content, and yeah, I've done a variety, and I've shifted to Horizon Europe funding projects, and that was a huge bulk of my work in 2023, which I hadn't really thought about doing that much. I was really publications before, so I think if you're willing to kind of step out of what you know and trying something, and you've got a client who's willing to work with you, then try it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in difficult times, it's worth stressing that you can stretch yourself a little bit and go in different directions and nose around a little bit. Ellie, have you got any more comments on the sort of the training demands or interests or needs, as it were, that we got?
Sure. Yeah. So there were a few comments around the fact that it can be hard to justify the expense if you're actually having to pay for training, or indeed finding the time if you're freelancing. But I think this is something around the way that we view our freelance work. It's one thing to kind of think of yourself as a writer who gets hired by people to do the writing, but if you're actually working as a freelancer, you are running your own business, and part of that is having a business mindset rather than just focusing on the writing work itself. So thinking about the kind of financial planning so that you have capacity to firstly invest in training that you need to keep your skills up to date, and also the time that is going to be needed to actually do that training. Because I think the way things are going at the moment, the types of content that people are working on in MedComms are expanding. And that means that the expectation that freelancers are going to be able to pick up different types of work is growing, I think. But also the way that we're working on things is changing. There were quite a lot of comments about wanting AI training in particular. And one of the kind of options in the question about training topics was around AI. And I think that was the one that got the most responses. So I think it's definitely something that people are interested in, but there may well be a bit of a mindset shift that needs to happen so that people are actually factoring it into their working lives rather than just thinking, oh yeah, I probably ought to do some training or develop my AI skills, but not actually thinking about it in terms of this is a critical business need.
I think that's so important. It comes up so much of the time that, and a number of, find ourselves saying the same thing every time. Think of it as a business. You've got to invest in your business, invest in yourself. Otherwise, your business will not succeed. And that might be financial investment, or it might certainly be time investment. You've got to think about it like that. Particularly, again, I'd say during the difficult times, the work isn't just coming in, so you've got to go.
And Peter, I would extend that to, I extend that to like attending professional meetings, attending EMWA or AMWA or ISMAP meetings.
Exactly.
The amount that you can, the connections you make, first of all, the potential clients that you can find there, but also like just the amount that you absorb, in terms of what's happening, what are the new trends, what do I need to be aware of, what you bring home, those are expensive, outings, right? Those are expensive things to do. And like every year I wince and bite the bullet and attend ISMAP. And every year I feel like if I didn't do that, I would not be the professional that I try to be, right? If I didn't invest that.
And I think the same with EMWA. I think if you speak to a lot of EMWA freelancers, they've probably got clients through networking at EMWA congresses and discussing projects with people and getting the contacts that way. And we've said it over and over again, but networking is key, and especially when times are quiet, that's when we need to network. So yeah, it may cost a bit to become a member or something, but it should pay off, I would like to think.
And to be frank, like any business, you build that into your business plan. So
Yeah,
you charge the amounts of money and do the amount of work you need to keep yourself going at the level you want to, but also to pay for those additional costs, whether that's your computer or whether it's attending the conference. It's part of the business. And I'm very aware we're out of time, but so there's just so much. I just want to get into so much more detail with this, with you and with everybody in the audience. And it's interesting to see the comments coming through. And I would encourage anyone in the audience to keep throwing them at us, because certainly we can talk about it and think about it and come back to you. Just by way of wrapping up, as we are sitting here in February 2024, sort of all recognizing there's been a disrupted year behind us. Just give us the one sentence answer, and I'm going to just choose you at random. Okay, are you positive, negative, neutral about the year coming up? Ellie, I'm going to start with you.
Positive, definitely. I think it's an industry that's still evolving, and there's a lot of potential. And I think we just need to keep our minds open and go with how it's all developing.
Okay, and anybody in the audience, let's have a rush of comments from you. Are you positive, negative, or neutral? Lisa, what are you sitting there? Positive, negative, or neutral?
Oh, I so endorse, Eleanor, the way that you just said that. I still have, I still don't know how this year is going to go, but I do feel like I think your fate is in your own hands, right? I think for each of us. And part of it has to do with, as you're saying, Eleanor, like being open, being willing to pivot, being willing to expand our skill sets. Like Laura said, being willing to try something different. Like we are going to have to keep moving, right, to keep up. And that's always true in every profession, and certainly in our profession. You have to be willing to kind of keep your eyes open and keep trying new things and keep hustling. But but I'm positive in the sense that, like, I think when we do those things, I think the work is out there.
Okay, Laura, go on. What's your view?
Well, just looking at the messages, there's a lot of positivity in the audience.
There is, isn't there?
Of course, there's a few cautiously positive and a bit negative. And I think this was a question on the LinkedIn feed on how do we optimize the year ahead. And I think we have to remain positive. If we want to stay as a freelancer, then we need to stay positive. I'd just say get out there, get networking. Don't just sit back and think it's going to come to you, because it's not. And not to stress too much, and definitely not to lower prices. I think we need to keep it the same, or as a lot of the US have done, maybe increase our rates, but definitely don't negotiate on your rates. We're trying to earn a living here, so yeah.
Okay.
Stay positive.
Okay. So there's and it's interesting as you're talking and I'm watching the comments coming in, as you say, a lot of positive comments coming in, but there's a lot of buts. And and I say everyone's experience is very different, and an individual. But if you can talk to each other, if we can and become members of groups, whatever group, there's a whole bunch of them out there. Whether they're little LinkedIn groups or they're meeting down the pub on a Friday night, or they're being a member of a professional organization. But don't just sit there on your own. Those of you that are quiet, know that lots of other people are a bit quiet as well. Those of you that are busy, most of you are acknowledging that you're probably having to work a bit harder than previously to be busy, but also just be aware that might change overnight when the email comes in tomorrow morning. And to have a network and support and a community to be a part of can be very, very helpful. Okay, we are over time. I'm enjoying myself, but I need to draw a line to this. So Thank you so much to you three for coming online, and we just winged that. I'm very aware of that. So thank you very much for being brave enough, as it were, to do that. I think that was interesting, lots of food for thought. Thank you to the audience for jumping on board and sharing your comments. I'll have a look at those later. I know I can speak for the three of you panelists that you're very happy to hear from people. LinkedIn is an easy way of doing it. I'm very happy to hear from anybody. Go and hashtag MedComms, everybody, keep the discussion going, and not just about the survey, but about stuff. And we'll all learn from each other. So in these very strange times, I'm going to wish you all a good day, and I'm going to stop the recording, and everyone give us a wave. Bye bye.